this is Aline from MasterYourWeb. You're watching HTML tutorial for absolute beginners, and the next videos will be focusing on working with forms. So let's begin. Alright, this is gonna be a mini series about forms, and after watching these videos you will be able to work with them because you will know the basics when it comes to them, and also by that time you would have also done some really nice exercises with them. So let's head into the topic. So forms are a really important part of any website. I guess that most of the websites have some sort of forms. Whether it's a contact form, a sign up form, a subscribe form, and so on and so forth. Those forms actually help us gather user data in order to do something with it. So for instance, a contact form takes in an email, maybe a phone number and a message, and that's able to send a message to the website owner. Then we have the sign up form, which takes in some personal data such as name, email, password, you name it, and creates an account for that user. And last but not least, we have the subscribe form, which takes in an email and gives that person some materials. For instance, articles or videos or whatever, basically. Therefore, forms are a vital part of every website, and knowing how to build a form is going to be a valuable asset. So the next step is to actually build a simple form, and for that we'll open Visual Studio Code and we will actually start our form. And the way we do it is by starting with the form tag, which basically wraps the form inside of its tags. So basically every form should have some inputs, which will be used to enter some data, and also some buttons, which will be used to send that data to the server, so that we will store them over there. And for now, I won't go into the part of actually storing those into the server and processing that data, but rather we will go into the HTML side of things and just presenting those inputs to the user. And for that, we'll start with our first input. So in this example, the current form will have a field for the first name, and then we will have another field for the last name, and last but not least, we'll have a button which actually submits the form. So we will have an input of type text for now, because as you will see in future videos, we will have many types of inputs, and text is just one of them. So we'll have an input type text, then we'll have an ID of first name, and then we'll have a name also of first name. And we will go through the differences between the ID and the name in about a second. Next, and yeah, I forgot to mention that this actually is a self-closing tag. Next, let's try to create our second input. So it's going to be also input type text. Then we'll have the ID of last name and the name of last name. Alright. And last but not least, we'll actually create our button, and that's going to be of input type submit. And we'll have a value of, let's say, submit this form. Alright, let's actually try to save it, and there we have our form. So we basically have this field for the first name, and I'll just enter my first name, and then we have the last name, and I'm gonna enter my last name, which is Martian. I know that it's pretty weird, but still. And we have the submit this form, and boom, we have submitted this form. So I think that you've seen that we've added both an ID and also a name, okay? So let's actually see why did we use those. So the ID is mainly used for CSS and JavaScript reasons. It's being used for CSS because by referencing that ID in the CSS, we actually have the possibility to style that element in the way that we want to. And also it can be useful in JavaScript, because maybe we want to do some animations to that particular input. Although in our case it's not necessary, it's good to know that we have that option as well. And then we have the name tag, which is a bit different than the ID, and basically the name is going to reference the value within the form. Alright, so actually if we look into the browser, we can see over here that we have a property called first name is equal to Aline, basically what we've just entered, and then another value of last name, which is equal to Sunmartean. So basically the first name and the last name over here are actually this value and this value. Alright, and in order to demonstrate it better, let's actually write like the first name test and the last name of test. And the reason for that is basically to make sure that this value is going to be different than the ID. Alright, let's actually reload it and write our name again. Okay, submit this form. Now we see that we have the first name test and the last name test. Okay, and as I mentioned, that's going to be useful when we would like to actually do something with that data. Okay, and then we have the submit button, and basically this value, as I think I've mentioned, is going to be the value that's going to be present over here into this button. And of course, a small mention, the ID and the name don't really need to have the same value. They could be different without any problems. It's just the fact that it's going to be really important to add meaningful values, both to the ID and also to the name, alright? And again, they don't have to match perfectly. Alright, so now it's going to be time for our exercise. So, as an exercise, we would like to do something different. We would like to do, like, whenever we reload the form, we would like to actually have our first name and our last name already set up for us, alright? Because right now when we reload the form, we don't see anything in it, okay? But we would like to see our first name and our last name, okay? And this exercise is going to be a bit different because we haven't actually talked about that subject before. But I will give you a hint and tell you that that thing is going to be possible if we use the value property. So hopefully that should be helpful for you to be able to solve the exercise on your own. But if not, it's not a problem at all. We'll see you in about 15 seconds. Alright, so 15 seconds have passed, so let's actually see how we can solve this together. So, as I mentioned, we have another property called value, and on every input, whenever we write the value and write like something in it, that's basically going to be the default value for that form, okay? So that's pretty nice. But also we have the possibility like to add something extra to that data, okay? So the default data was Aline, and we can write actually test, alright? And over here we can write test as well. And you can see that the values over here are being updated. So basically whenever we want to have like a default value, we have the value property over here, which basically solves that for you. And also as a small mention, I think that you've noticed that if we write something different over here and submit this form, you can see that basically the page is being reloaded. That's actually the default behavior when we are working with the forms, and it's not a problem at all. In the future, when we will be working with JavaScript, you will see that we actually have the possibility to not reload the whole page again, but for now I think it's just fine to actually reload the page again. So that was our first video when it comes to the forms. I really hope that you enjoy it and also learn something useful. On the next video we're also gonna be talking about forms, so we'll see you then. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed the content and if you consider that it's at least 1% relevant, then please leave a like, a share and subscribe to the channel for more content. We'll see you on the next one.